What's up, everyone? Welcome to our weekly Premier League update, where we update you on what happened the week before and get you set for what's going on in the upcoming week in the Premier League. So let's start off with reviewing what went down in week one, and we'll start with the opening game of the Premier League season this year, Brentford and Arsenal. Brentford actually upset Arsenal, to many people's surprise. To my surprise, too, I had them as one of the relegation teams. Reluctantly, I really like Brentford, and I really liked the way they played this week. They were consistent in their attacking. Ethan Pinnock and Pontus Jansson were brilliant in the back there. Pinnock could very well have won man of the match if it wasn't for Ivan Toney. And if you had told me before that Brentford would beat Arsenal without Ivan Toney scoring a goal, I'd think you're crazy. But he did. They did. They won 2-0 without Ivan Toney scoring, which is a promising sight to see that if they can keep finding ways to score without Ivan Toney, maybe they can win these games more consistently and stay up. Arsenal was shaky defensively. I also chalk this loss up to also not having their two best scoring threats in Aubameyang and Lacazette. Mikel Arteta wasn't making any excuses for why his squad came out so lackluster. But if Brentford can win games against an Arsenal team that looked like they would have been more of a middle to lower pack team without those two strikers, then there's no reason why they can't beat teams that should be worse than Arsenal. So a good opening Premier League game for Brentford. Moving on to Manchester United and Leeds United. Thorough beatdown from the Red Devils here. 5-1 over Leeds at Old Trafford. Man United was all around brilliant. Pogba is playing more of a facilitating role in that midfield. 4 assists in 75 minutes. He only had 3 assists in the entire Premier League season last year, so great start for him. And Bruno Fernandes looked like he was the best player in the Premier League. Everyone played a little better than what I expect them to play week in and week out. McTominay was good. Mason Greenwood was great. So a lot of things to take away from this Man United team that usually finds a way to really lay a beat down on Leeds at Old Trafford, as they won 6-2 against them at home last season. Leeds, chalk it up to not having Calvin Phillips. They weren't. Clumsy touches. Guys were playing out of position. It really much looked like they needed a few more weeks to get game ready. They were out of form. I expect Leeds to bounce back. Moving on to Watford and Aston Villa. Watford comes out with the win 3-2 at home. They really pressured Aston Villa with shots. 13 attempts, 7 of them were on target, so that's always good to see that above 50% shooting clip there. They were great up the middle with Bonaventure and Sarr. Ismail Sarr is likely going to be their player of the season, especially if he keeps playing like this week in and week out. But they've got to close better. Aston Villa rallied in the end. They were up 3-0, and then Aston Villa came back, scored 2 goals. Overall, a rough start, though, really cost Aston Villa this game. They need to get that chemistry going once they get Emi Buendia in there more, once Danny Ings gets familiar. They're struggling without Jack Grealish to find their footing, but they'll find it, and I think they'll be a European contender. They'll definitely bounce back week 2. Everton, 3-1 win at home against Southampton in Rafa Benitez's first game as Everton boss. They closed well. Richarlison looked fantastic. I thought he'd look a little out of form coming off the Olympics a few weeks ago. No fatigue at all. He looked great. And they were just offensively sound. So a lot of doubters of Everton, maybe they're thinking twice. I think this was the best possible outcome for Everton. I don't expect this week in and week out, but it was a good showing to see what they can do. Southampton had a lot of offseason turnover. A lot of guys transferred in and out this summer. The fact that they lost Vestergaard too before that game. He's going off to Leicester now, so there really isn't a comfortable lead in that back four. But the one bright side is their new signing, Adam Armstrong, scored. So it's going to be a rough season for Southampton, but they've got to find ways to beat teams even at Everton's level, but especially lower if they want to stay up this year. Chelsea and Crystal Palace, not much to say here. Chelsea, the 3-0 win at home over Crystal Palace. Chelsea's got a deep roster, and they showed their depth with goals from not the usual Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, Mason Mount. It was from Chalobah, Alonso, and Pulisic were their goal scorers. They dominated offensively, 63% of possession, 13 attempts, 6 on target, again near that 50% clip. in terms of shooting. Crystal Palace just has to look at this as this is one of the two teams that really could win the Premier League this year. They've just got to look on to the next week. Not a whole lot that you can take out of that. Not a great showing, but Chelsea's a good team. Leicester and Wolves. Can Leicester win when Vardy doesn't score? They won 1-0 at home at the King Power against Wolves, but Vardy was the only goal scorer there. They were sound defensively, and Vestergaard coming in from Southampton will only shore up that their center back depth. But can they win when Vardy doesn't score? They need to find more. They need to find more ways to score, so it's not all on Vardy's shoulders. Because last season he started well, and then kind of tapered off towards the end when it came to the leading goal scorers. So Wolves need to put more shots on target. They had 17 shots, only 3 of them are on target. They really have to pressure keepers if they are going to score. They need to make the most of their crosses. They had a ton of crosses this game, but they need to get the head on the ball. They need to find ways to put the ball in the back of the net and to get the ball on target. And they need the old Raul Jimenez form before he went out with that scary skull fracture last year. He was their top scorer for years. He really needs to get back to that and get comfortable again if Wolves wants to win. Moving on to Burnley and Brighton. Burnley loses at home 2-1, but showed some bright side there. Got off to a good start. They were scary in the air off corners, getting that goal in the second minute. They need to make sure that they sustain those strong first halves like they did here, but they also have to make sure that they close out games. Didn't close out well. So obviously, if you can't play like this at home, you got to find ways to win on the road too. So it's going to be a tough season for Burnley. They are an older team. Their older team needs to figure out how they're going to close out games and not have the rally back that Brighton brought. And Brighton's depth really won them the game. Moder came in, assisted on Maupay's goal to tie it up. McAllister, just a few minutes later, came off the bench. Within the first minute, he scored. So their depth is winning games. Graham Potter's a good manager, knows how to tactically win games. And with Maupay's goal, I think he might be back in form here. Is that something that he was a little disappointing last year? Brighton really needs him to step up, They really need him to score goals because they struggle to score. So if he can score, there's no doubt in my mind that they'll stay up in the Premier League this year. Obviously, they were missing Ben White in the center off those corners there. Burnley did look good, but they handled the game admirably on defense, though. Really good game for Brighton this week. Norwich and Liverpool rounding out the games that were on Saturday. There were 2 games on Sunday. But rounding out Saturday's game, Norwich lost at home 3-0 to Liverpool. Norwich had a great first half, though. They were the better team in the first half. But do they have a second half in them? That's the one thing they didn't this week. Can they develop that second half against teams that aren't as good as Liverpool? They need to tighten up in the back. They need to lessen the opposing opportunities and shots on net. And they need to put shots on target too. 14 attempts, 3 shots on target. We've said that for a lot of teams. Norwich also falls in that category. Liverpool, they need to come out 100% from the start. They can afford to do this against lower teams like Norwich. They can't afford to do this against the top teams like City, like Chelsea, like Tottenham, like United. They have to make sure that they come out 100% from the start because they can't always rely on those big second half performances. Great game from the bench though. Bobby Firmino potting one. That's always a promising sight to see the bench depth perform. They need to ensure that they have a good counterattack if they're going to play even possession football. It was an even 50-50 split in this game when it came to possession. So they have to make sure that if they're going to be at 50% or lower, they have to make sure that they have a good counterattack to really warrant making the most of their possession rather than getting most of the possession. Moving on to the 2 games on Sunday, we'll start with Newcastle and West Ham. Thoroughly entertaining game, 6 goals in this game. Newcastle loses 4-2 at home to West Ham. Newcastle had great form in the first half. They were up 2-1 at the break. Like I've said for some other teams, do they have a second half in them? This team has a lack of depth, and it showed in that second half, giving up the 3 goals. But overall, St. Maximin and Wilson, they work well up front. Maximin's feet are like wizardry when he has the ball. Joe Willock will only help. Obviously, he wasn't in the game. They just tied up the loose ends when it came to his transfer. He should feature this upcoming week. But overall, West Ham rallied back. Ben Rama looks good, like he's finally here, the product that they hoped they had last year. He produced very well this week. And they looked offensively sound, and this is a good tell of, they don't have to worry about European football quite yet. They've got a few more weeks until Europa League play starts. So these are the games they have to make sure they win before their focus is divided. And then rounding out the week, the one that everyone was looking forward to, Tottenham was hosting Man City, and they end up with the surprise victory over the defending champions. They had brilliant counterattacks, which made up for their low possession. They were great at taking the ball away in the infield. Specifically Lucas Moura, Dele Alli, Tanganga in the back four. He looked good when it came to that. They need to put more shots on net. 13 attempts, only 2 shots on target. Got to make sure they pressure teams. But overall, a good showing against City, which was the opposite of Tottenham. They need to protect the ball in the midfield. They did not protect the ball. They had clumsy touches. I was impressed by Jack Grealish. He looked a little out of form, but overall, he will be in form in a few weeks. But like Jack Grealish, they were not match ready. I think after that international break in early September, you'll start to see the powerhouse of Man City. So they might have a rough first 3 weeks, but they'll certainly come back. And now moving to week 2, here are the 3 matches that I'm looking forward to watching, and I think will be great matchups. Leeds and Everton is the first one. Leeds needs to bounce back. They need to clean up their touches. I think Calvin Phillips will be more featured here. He had that extended break just because of fatigue from the Euros. I expect him to be at least a part off the bench, if not starting this game. And Everton typically starts well. They were the top of the Premier League through the first, I believe, 5 or 6 weeks last year. They typically start well, but they're probably playing the hungriest team that they have in the first 5 weeks that they have in any season. So Everton, again, they start well, but how will they fare against a team that's better coached with Bielsa? And overall, just a team that's supposed to finish better. How will they fare against a really hungry Leeds team? That'll be an interesting match to watch. Brighton is hosting Watford. Brighton, they need to have that great defense from last weekend. And again, if Neil Maupay is in form, I think that he could put at least one in, and that could be the difference maker with that great defense that they have. And is Watford a legitimate team? I thought they were going to finish bottom of the table. Can they continue to beat teams on their level, on the same level as them? I think that's just as important as beating teams above them. Watford's a team that's looking to get wins any way they can. Can they pull off a win against a projected bottom half team in Brighton? And look for Ismail Assar to lead the way there. And lastly, West Ham and Leicester City. This will be a great game. Really, it's going to come out to how many goals are being scored. Leicester hasn't been the greatest at scoring if it's not Jamie Vardy. So obviously, Vardy has to be a part of this, especially on the score sheet. Can they find ways to score without Vardy? And can West Ham continue their torrid pace, as I said before European play starts and their focus is divided between the Europa League and the Premier League? So again, Leeds United, Everton, Brighton, Watford, West Ham, Leicester are the games I'm looking for this week. And that'll do it for our weekly update, our weekly Premier League update. Make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you next week for our next update. Peace.